A very good Monday evening to you. It's 7 o'clock, so it's time for the Monday night panel, and a very happy Diwali to you for those who celebrate this particular festival. So a very good night to you. And an extraordinary evening, of course, in British history again, as we have a new Prime Minister. We should also say about SAS travel. If you're going to Bradford tomorrow night, the coach leaves the county ground at 1 o'clock tomorrow lunchtime. And they'll be open on Thursday at 7 p.m. No opening for SAS travel tomorrow night, of course, because we're on the road to Bradford. There are limited Mansfield and Stockport spaces due to timescales. So if you're looking to book for future trips, Stockport and Mansfield, limited spaces available. A little bit later on, we'll be talking to our Monday night panel, and we have an excellent panel for you. Mark Merriman will be joining us. James Spencer will also be talking to Dan Hunt and Andrew Halls as well. Chris Kyle is not with us tonight. She'll be back next week when we'll be talking to one of our great recent players. Michael Doughty will be joining us on the sofa next Monday night at 7 o'clock. But it's my great pleasure to welcome not only to the Monday night panel, but also to Swindon Town Football Club, our new club secretary, Jack Tomlinson. A very good evening to you, Jack.
Thank you, Vic. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much indeed, and I trust you are too. A big appointment, so we're going to find out a little bit about you in the next 15 minutes or so. First of all, your background, because you come in as club secretary. Ray Murphy, of course, was previously in post. When did this all happen? How did it come about?
Around, because I've been at Oldham previously as club secretary. Saw the job advert sort of late August time. And then went through quite a long application process for it and started on the 21st of September. So been in the role for just over a month now and really enjoying it.
So what secretarial background did you have? Because obviously you've worked at Oldham. We'll get on to John Sheridan in a minute. You may be aware that he has Swindon connections, but, you know, what got you into the Oldham secretary's position?
I was at college studying business in Liverpool and just really wanted to work in football. So sent an email to probably every single football club in the Northwest. And luckily Oldham got back to me and invited me in as like an assistant club secretary intern sort of thing to work with the club secretary there. And I was doing that for about a year, traveling twice a week to Oldham. And when the club secretary then left, luckily the ownership decided to offer me the role. I think partly because there wasn't many people who really trusted at the time, so he thought he'd give it a chance, and hopefully we'll look impressed.
Just if you hear any noise in the background, by the way, that's my grandson laughing at a video. Not anything that you say, so apologies for that, for the noises off, if you see what I mean. So when you got that job, I mean, Oldham have had their problems, have they not, in the past few years? I mean, it's not been an easy time for Oldham, so how difficult has it been?
Yeah, I mean, I think similar to Swindon, really. Last season, they were under the embargo. They had ownership problems, supporter protests and things like that. So probably similar to the situation Swindon were in the previous seasons. And it was a challenge, but the sort of 20 odd months I was there working in that environment's probably done me a much better experience than, maybe 5 years in quite an easy club. All the challenges I faced in that has really set me up well for a role here, which is kind of a more comfortable one.
And how did you get on with John Sheridan?
We got on okay. Got on all right. Didn't have any major issues with him. Yeah, it was all right.
Because the extraordinary thing from Swindon's fans' point of view is he's a legend up there, isn't he? It's an extraordinary thing, really.
Yeah, it's weird how he's almost seen as like a god there. Almost, he's like worshipped by all the fans. But then when Oldham came down to Swindon last season, you tell that it was really the opposite side of it from the Swindon fans' point of view.
Were you here for that one?
I wasn't actually, no, but I wish I was.
Yes, it was quite an afternoon. So the job comes up in Swindon then. And is there any appreciable difference between the job you're doing now and the previous one at Oldham? Because let's get the age thing out of the way. You're 21. You're the youngest secretary in the EFL or Premier League by a little way. Many people might say, a 21-year-old being club secretary, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, if you Yeah, I'm young, but I think that helps. If anything, I can sort of bring in the modern way of doing things. Like I'm quite good on a computer and doing things that way. I'm kind of like up to date with all the current sort of way the world works. When you have a lot of club secretaries that are sort of reaching retirement age and they're still working with paper and fax machines and stuff, and hopefully I can come in and kind of change that in a way and just make the whole role more efficient. Basically, yeah. There's not too many differences between the role here in Oldham. I think it's quite a standard job, club secretary with what you do. It's all the football administration, basically all of the stuff around supporting the first team. So yeah, it's pretty similar. There's a few changes, but not too many.
And I guess you can relate to players as well, because there are, a lot of players that are around a similar age too, aren't they?
Yeah, that helps as well, because part of the role at Swindon, which is slightly different to the Oldham one, is there is a bit of a player liaison side to it. So I'm there to support the players with any like personal issues they might have, helping them set up accommodation, sort the bills out, just any like general issues. But because I'm kind of the same age, and myself having moved to Swindon, I'm needing to do everything myself with my own bills, my own rent and all that. I can then kind of help the players do that as well, who are of a similar age to me. Pretty much in a similar situation.
Sure, and I guess when footballers move from club to club, it's a difficult time for them, isn't it? I mean, you just experienced that move, so you have that experience too.
Yeah. I didn't really realise until I had to do it myself how difficult it must be for the players at such a young age, moving all around the country. Like when I got the role, I was in a hotel for around a week and I was going mad by the end of it. So I don't know how players are doing that, for 10 years through their career and stuff. It's really sort of made me realise they do kind of give up a lot to be footballers, yeah.
So what is your day-to-day role? I mean, I'm going to ask you about transfer windows because in a little while, because I guess as a secretary, that must be one of the most arduous tasks, making sure those things get sent off at the right time. But what is your day-to-day role?
So yeah, on a day-to-day, I'm like the main point of contact between the club, or the primary point of contact between the club and all like the football bodies, so the EFL, the FA, UEFA, if needed. Also responsible for like all the compliance with EFL, the FA, all the fixture administration. So organising the home fixtures, doing the confirmations with the referees, the opposition, responding to scout requests. And then for away games, it's the booking the coach, booking the hotel, just making sure the day runs smoothly if it's an overnight, making sure we've got enough rooms and just things like that, and just making sure everyone's just kept in the loop with everything all the time. Communication is like a massive part of the role. Then there's the post-match admin, so all of the referee reports, match reports, gate returns for home games, things like that. So yeah, on a day-to-day, it's just pretty much built around fixtures, players, things like that. And then there's the, if we're getting a player with a new contract, like recently with Wakeling, it's me that kind of drafts that up and gets it ready to then be signed off by the ownership and by Sandro as well. So yeah, just it's quite varied, but mainly football focused and fixture focused, pretty much.
So what's your average day length then? I mean, it sounds like your plate's pretty big. I mean, what is the average length of your day?
Yeah, I mean, it can vary, to be honest. Some days might need to be working late on into the evening or start a bit earlier. But other days, if you've got a Saturday, and the second Saturday's away, Wednesday afternoons can be quite quiet and things like that. You get periods that are quiet, but then periods that are really busy. It's just a really varied role, but it makes it a lot more exciting than a standard 9 to 5.
Yeah, so. Sure. I'm guessing you don't get to many of the away games, but I think you were at Bristol Rovers last week, weren't you? I mean, how many games do you actually get to, apart from home matches, clearly?
I've pretty much been to every game, home and away, since I've started. First one was Grimsby. I've been to every one since, including that Bristol Rovers. I'm at Bradford tomorrow night. So yeah, I'm going to try and get to as many games as I can, really, because I know it helps when I can get to the away games more, because if there's any issues with the team or with the squad, on the travel up or anything when we're there, I'm kind of there to sort it out. Like at Stevenage, we had we had an issue with the analyst, which luckily we were able to sort because I was down there. So yeah, I'm going to try and get to as many games as I can.
Well, hopefully catch up with you tomorrow night at Bradford. Then, looking forward to the game, and possibly might see you at some point. This right, here we go. This is from Steve, and this goes back to what you were saying. How can we buy and sell players without a fax machine? Because I think I'm right in saying faxes are still used to register a player when they're transferred. Is that right still, or can you do it by email?
My only experience of it is email. You just basically email between the clubs, print it off, get people to sign it or attach an e-signature digitally and submit it to the league. Yeah, I've never used a fax machine myself, to be honest.
Oh, so that's a bit, that's a bit of an urban myth then, because I just assumed it was still fax machines. The only thing that used fax machines was transfers.
Not my experience of it, no. Maybe higher up, possibly, but no, I've never.
Okay, fair enough. Sean says, what's your thoughts on the season so far and what you've seen?
I've been impressed, to be honest. I've gone from watching Oldham last season, who weren't the best to watch, to Swindon. I'm really impressed with the way they play football. To be honest, you don't get many League Two clubs that actually try and play football, which is nice to see. Got some really good players in. I'm impressed. I'm expecting the club to definitely be up there this season. Yeah.
Anthony says, hi, Anthony. I was secretary for a Sunday league team for 1 year. It's a thankless task at times. So big up to Jack. I mean, those of us who've done a secretarial role in whatever, there is a lot to do, isn't there?
Yeah, it is a busy job. Yeah.
Right. So let's get on to transfer windows then. What was it like at Oldham? Did you experience one there? How did it work?
A couple at Oldham, both under an embargo, which didn't help. If anything, it kind of made me learn more. You had to be a lot more creative around the way you'd write the transfer deals to get around the embargo, which was useful to sort of learn. And yeah, I love transfer windows, to be honest. I really enjoy the whole thing of having to get a deal like across the line, doing the paperwork, finding out ways of like wording the contract to make sure like everyone's happy, the players happy, the club are happy, the agents are happy, and everything. I really enjoy transfer windows, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one in January. Can't wait for it.
So who is all right? So the deal is being done. I don't know. Let's use McCurdy as an example, right? Because it was a late one. So that deal's going on. Who actually puts all the contract details together? Who's responsible for that? Is that you?
Yeah. So say with like Hibs and McCurdy, they put an offer in for the player. They'd then like sort the offer and all that and everything. But we'd be, say we're buying a player. That's easier actually. It'd be like up to the board almost to negotiate and agree all the terms, and then it's onto me to get all that information and then write up the transfer agreement, the player's contract, bonus schedules, insurance, stuff like that. So I'm basically given this pile of information and then have to put it into a proper contract, basically.
Wow. So how much, I mean, say the deadline is midnight. I mean, there's an hour's difference to the Scotland one, which I couldn't quite work out anyway. But so it's coming up to 5 to midnight, right? And you've still got 5 minutes to get this deal through. What's it like? Give us an example of that room at that moment.
You just got to stay calm, to be honest. You can't really think about it. If you start letting the time pressure, get on top of you, then you're going to make mistakes and stuff, which is going to cost the transfer. It's just going to get rejected by the league if there's a few mistakes and stuff. So you need to really just stay calm and just be quick but calm, basically. Yeah.
And is there any leeway? I mean, if you get it in 2 minutes past midnight or something, is there any leeway, or do the Football League say no?
Yeah, I mean, there's depending on the circumstances, there's always a bit of leeway. Depending on what went on and what happened and stuff that caused the delay, there's always going to be, I think, a bit of leeway because it's kind of, everyone wants a transfer to go through just because exciting for the fans and everything as well. So, you know, for the sake of 2 minutes to stop a transfer going through, I don't think that'd really be too. As long as you can, you know, prove that you've done everything right, you've not tried to kind of go against the points of the deadline. You know.
Well, it's interesting. Right. Do the club get to, this is from Andy, do the club get to write reports on match officials, and do you get any feedback? So you'll be aware, you're a football fan, you know what it's like. There's a referee, you get to write the reports. Who actually puts the mark down? Is it the sort of Scott Lindsay? Does he give the referee a mark? Who gives the mark for the referee on a Saturday?
So yeah, I'm the one that submits the report. I know when I do it at Oldham, I had to go through Shaz and Tommy every time. They'd basically give me the numbers, give me the score, tell me the report to write, and I'd do that. It's more kind of up to me at Swindon now. You know, if the referees just had a decent game, then I just put in a decent mark, basically a couple comments, and then submit it. If it's of the club's opinion that a more another type of report needs to go in, then yeah, I'd speak with Scott, speak with Sandro, and go from there basically. But I think it's more of a discussion on the refs now, with like myself and Sandro and Scott, rather than at Oldham, it's just all up to shit. So kind of a joint thing, really.
Okay. Rich says, well, he says, will you be at Bradford tomorrow night? I think you've already answered that. You will be, hopefully.
Yeah.
And he also says, Sean says, marking's low near enough every game then. Laugh out loud. Stockport FA Cup tickets. I know that's not your bag, is it really? I mean, that's the ticketing department. But are they in? When will we get them? Do you know?
To be honest, I'm not entirely sure. I know we've just started speaking with Stockport now. I know, yeah, that's not really, I'm not too sure. I know they have, I did just see an email today about it, but no, I'll have to get back to you on that.
No, fair enough, because I know that's not your thing. On referees, Mark, is it true anything below a 6 means you have to go to an FA head office to explain? Is that right?
No, it's a score out of 100, and anything less than a certain mark, you've got to just write a report, and yeah, you can request feedback and stuff like that. So yeah,
fair enough.
Nothing like having the FA headquarters or nothing now.
You know, get summoned before the beak or anything like that. Okay, well, we're going to let you go because I know you've had a busy day, and we really appreciate your time. But would you come on in the future? And we can have an hour with you. Is that all right? You can talk to us about when you've settled in a little bit and found your feet under the table. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine with me. Yeah.
Lovely. Well, Jack, we'll let you go now. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and we appreciate your time. Hopefully see you at Bradford tomorrow night.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. See you tomorrow.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Jack. That's Jack Tomlinson then, the brand new football club secretary at Swindon Town. Spoke very well, I thought. So we'll get some reaction from our panel now as we bring them on individually. Let's talk to James Spencer. Very good evening to you.
Okay.
Mr. Hawes, very good evening to you.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Dan, hi.
Good evening, Vic. Hello, everyone.
And Mark, hello to you.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
James, your thoughts on that? I thought, for a young man who's just settling into the job, I thought he spoke very well.
Yeah, very eloquent and professional. Crikey, I wish at 21 I spoke like that and came across like that. He's obviously had lots of experience, hasn't he, at Oldham, which is obviously stood him in good stead. So, yeah, no, very interesting. I think the hour-long episode would probably be quite an interesting one. Maybe do one after the January transfer window, Vic. That would be interesting. Because I find it fascinating, a lot of these things, how they do it. Yeah, no, very interesting job. I've known a few club secretaries at other clubs, and I know it's quite a stressful job. So yeah, kudos to him. Good to have him on board.
Yeah, Andrew. I mean, a lot of the club secretaries I've known over the years are a little bit older than that. To be honest, I still thought it was fax machines, but he's obviously put us right on that. What was your impression of him?
Yeah, no, I'm slightly disappointed the fax machine myth has now been exploded, as no doubt are a few companies on their last legs trying to squeeze out every last fax machine they've possibly made since about 1990, God knows what. But no, I in half serious and half joking, I would imagine being at Oldham does teach you a lot there. I think he sort of alluded to that, didn't he, when he was kind of mentioning the embargo. I think we all know to a certain extent quite how difficult that was and how challenging the owner was. So if he was able to kind of keep that running professionally at his end football-wise, and you got the impression he did, then he should be. Hopefully, he should find here a lot easier.
Yeah, Dan. I mean, I guess if you're into football administration, it's your dream job, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I've got a lot in common with Jack. Early 20s, like I am. Yeah, if it's anything like cricket administration, then it's just one massive headache. And I suppose Jack's role is to, remove all of that stress from the people who want to actually run the football club. So, no, a vital role. I found it interesting his use of the word creative when it came to putting together contracts to get around embargoes. That'd be an interesting one, but I'm not sure how much trouble the club might be in for that one.
I mean, Mark, when we were sort of relaying what he had to do, I was thinking, I'm tired halfway through just listening to the tasks he have. I mean, it's an extraordinary list, isn't it?
Yeah. Unlike Dan, I've got very little in common with Jack, but I still think, yeah, it's good, isn't it? It might be the future. Perhaps his point about being younger and relating to people more easily is a good one. You still wonder a little bit about experience, but having said that, perhaps that's the future, and he'll be massively computer literate like most young people today. Another thing I haven't got in common with him. So, yeah, good luck to him.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, Dave the Chair. He says, evening Towns fans and Vic's grandson, who's quiet at the moment, which is good news, really. Well, not good news, but you know what I mean. Right, let's get on with it then. Yeah, right, let's... Daz St. George says, bearing in mind what he said about referee scored, Andy Woolmer, bet he had a good score. Talking of Mr. McCurdy. Right, let me bring this subject on. On the subject of Dave the Chair, he sent me this message a little bit earlier on. Right, here we go. Read the atmosphere or lack of. I've just messaged Andrew Cousins, read this. Our ground should have been bouncing at 3:17, but it wasn't. Why? 2-0, I was bored, which isn't right. What needs addressing? Another player's outburst like Harry did last season to wake us up. Is it the style of football we were promised? I remember the 80s, the noise was unreal for 90 minutes. Come what may. My only real suggestion would be, do our away fans sit together at the county ground? Maybe we should look into that. I'm not too sure what else to say, read the issue. There we are, Dave the Chair. What are your views on that, James? Because I don't know about you, but I don't remember the county ground being as quiet as it is at the moment. And it was quiet Saturday. We were 2-0 up and it just went quiet, didn't it?
It's kind of weird, isn't it? I agree with you. I think the atmosphere on Saturday was probably one of the quietest for the kind of attendance we had I've ever known at the county ground. I think it's been getting worse actually over the last few games. I had this very conversation earlier on today, actually on Sunday with Andy from the OSC, and because the club have asked us to provide some thoughts on how we can improve the atmosphere at the ground for the next advisory board, which is next week. I think there's a number of things. One is the style of play. That's the feedback you get from everyone. But I think the problem is the last couple of games we've come out of the blocks quite quickly. And we played better early on in the game, yet the atmosphere still remains pretty dire, to be honest. There's hardly any singing from the town end, and I think people just seem to get on the back of the players really, really quickly. It's really frustrating. I don't know what the answer is, because we've something we need to come up with a plan for, but I think I really don't know what we can do to improve it. It feels like it almost needs a bit of a campaign, really, in the media to try and get fans to, whatever they think about the style of play, just get behind the team. We're in 5th place. We're not doing that badly, yet it still feels a bit like a morgue at times at the county ground. You can hear yourself, you can hear a pin drop sometimes, which is not good. But I think there's a couple of things. One is, I think the atmosphere before the game, we're not whipping up the crowd. If anyone's watched a home game at Brentford, I know they're a Premier League team, but I use them as an example. They really whip their crowd up 45 minutes before a game. The music, what they're going on the pitch, they turn the lights on and off. They have just, I know we can't do that at the Counting Ground, but there's things you can do. It just feels a little bit same old in terms of, we're not really whipping the crowd up. I think there's things we can definitely do. And I think style of play definitely has an impact. But I also think fans it's that kind of 50-50 thing, isn't it? Fans are saying the style of play, but ultimately, if you don't encourage the players, I don't know. I think there are a lot of things we can do, but I don't know necessarily what the answer is at the moment. It needs a bit more thought, I think. I'm
not going to mention the D word. For those of us who go with grounds where there are objects beginning with D, we don't like them much.
No, we definitely don't want to.
I know the old duffers are starting to bring the noise campaign, which of course you may remember was the name of a fanzine way back in time. Stephen says the lack of away support doesn't help the atmosphere either.
True.
Yeah. Kevin, hello, Kevin. Nobody in the ground at 2:15. I guess that's another factor. Andrew, I know as a commentator, you use the atmosphere, don't you? I mean, it is something which must have been a nightmare during the COVID years because they want one. But, you use it to rise and fall, don't you? How have you found it?
Yeah, no, I can't argue that anything other than Saturday felt quite flat. Like James was saying, even when it was 2-0, in some of Saturday, maybe in the last couple of home games, you've got Colchester and Hartlepool have been right down the bottom. So perhaps everyone has arrived with that sort of slight sense of expectation. We'll turn up and roll these over, and anything that isn't that gets people a bit sort of grumbly. But when you do go 2-0 up after 20 minutes, you would kind of expect it to be a bit more bouncing. I don't know if there's whether people are just willing to engage. I think the Great Western Reds came along and did tifos and certainly put some effort into improving the atmosphere, and yet they seem to get quite a hard time off certain sections of the fan base. So perhaps we're all we've some reasons all slumped at once into some kind of surly football middle age where we expect everything to arrive right on time. But yeah, I sympathise about the style of play. Sometimes it does feel a bit laboured, but I couldn't quite explain why after 2-0 like James, it was just all a bit. Oh, here we are. This is quite nice, but it's
yeah,
right.
I agree. It did go really quiet, and then of course they get a goal back, and it gets even quieter because everybody gets nervous. So there we are. David says the atmosphere has gone down since Wellens left. That's down to the style of play. Anthony, atmosphere comes from 10, who the opposition is, how STFC are playing attacking wise. Our fans are quite noisy before kick-off in the town then, should save it for during the match. I think fans are still recovering from last season's disappointing end and the departures of Payne and McCurdy. Thanks, Ian. And Andy says there's only one man and his dog inside the ground 45 minutes before kick-off. Dan, obviously, McCurdy went a long way to exciting fans, but even at times last season, by the way, nice to see you in your garage with your car behind you. It's a lovely nipping around town sort of motor. McCurdy did do a lot last year, didn't he, to get the crowd whipped up. I don't see too much of that from the players somehow, but they're concentrating on the game, so why would they? What's your view?
Yeah, well, I think you're definitely right to touch on that. A couple of big personality kind of players have departed in the summer. Harry McCurdy, one of the biggest characters we've seen in the last decade or two. Not only in terms of his off-field persona, but his playing style was very unpredictable. I described him as a bit of a fire starter kind of player on the LS pod. So definitely our front line is missing a bit of his sort of random pace and injection of ideas. He's willing to lose the ball to try something, which probably I look around this Swindon side at the minute and they do look a bit samey, a little bit one-paced. Others have touched on the sort of possession-based style, which is generally quite low tempo when it's done badly. That doesn't necessarily help in the way that, like a Di Canio style was high tempo, high intensity, and the Swindon fans really bought into that. I think the whole summer sucked a little bit of life out of everyone. There was a lot of turnover, obviously managers, assistant managers, key players, Payne, McCurdy, and others. But I'll also mention, looking towards the town end on Saturday, it did seem more sparsely populated. And there's perhaps two things that play there that Andrew's referenced, the GW Reds, who have always, for whatever reason, been unfairly chastised. They seem to have up sticks to the sort of corner of the Arkles by the away fans. But also, we're not letting under-16s in unattended, which is maybe having a direct impact on the number of people in there. And maybe some of our under-16 fans were some of the people getting the singing going and adding to that atmosphere. So I'll be interested what others think. In response to that.
I will be getting on to the thorny subject of the under-16s, Mr. Spencer, very shortly. This is from Stephen. For me, it's the PA and music. The man on the mic needs to work the crowd too. More upbeat tunes, interaction with fans. It could be argued that if you have too much music before the match, it drowns out the crowd, which is a big problem. Ricky says, get the ball in the box, keep passing the ball sideways, does nothing for the supporters and atmosphere. I travelled from Norfolk this weekend, and yes, it's very quiet. I was in the town end. Hello, Tony. Always better away, a lot more atmosphere. Home matches, people leave it late to get in, i.e. 2:45. Style of play, go 2-0 up, then pass tip-tap around the back. Forward, then back and back. But that's our style now. Just get the players to motivate the supporters around the ground. That's my thoughts only. I'm off to Bradford. The 300 or so will get behind the team. Why can't 8,500 at home? Lots of comments coming in about that, Mark. The way Matty Taylor made this very point when he was on the sofa with us a couple of weeks ago. You go away from home, the support is noisy, but it isn't at Swindon. So it's not a new problem, is it?
No, we probably had it for a while. I think the chaps have kind of alluded to a lot of the things that are probably happening that have contributed to a flat atmosphere. I made the same point when I was writing my notes before the game, really. And I definitely don't want to see a drum or hear a drum at all. I just think that's a contrived way of building atmosphere. I think the atmosphere for Newport was better. Whether it's better under lights on a Tuesday night, I don't know. Perhaps free alcohol to all the fans is the answer as well. You can dish that out and see if we can get them going. And interestingly, on Saturday, if you think about the second half, the crowd and the atmosphere picked up when Darcy made that 60-yard run across the pitch to chase down a seemingly lost cause. And those are the kinds of things that fire a crowd up. You don't necessarily need a goal. You just need somebody to put in a good tackle, somebody to do something that goes beyond the line of duty, and suddenly the crowd's up. So it was a little bit better second half. But I echo all the chaps' points. It's disappointing to see that 2-0 up and it's very flat. And our home record, of course, is much better than when compared to this time last year. Yeah. We've only lost one at home in 8, haven't we? So it's pretty impressive. So, you call on the fans to get behind the team. I take the point about the passing style, and it can be a bit laborious at times. But let's get the fans behind the team united. And the fact is that despite not playing particularly well, we're 5th in the table, which is quite a remarkable achievement in many ways, isn't it?
Yeah, Mr. Hawes is looking for free alcohol for the commentators, I think, which would be quite an interesting spirit.
Definitely, yeah. Lifted.
PA system not very good in the Don Rogers. Long-standing problem, of course. Packing for Bradford now. Drums at Bradford tomorrow night. Yeah, they do have a drum, I think, at Bradford, if I remember rightly. Yeah. You see in games abroad when the team being announced that the fans get involved. Whether that would work here, I don't know. It is interesting, isn't it? Abroad, there seems to be, they're in there for hours beforehand. Some teams are like hours before the match, quite frankly, even going barking. Style of play means the fans know that however well we're doing, players will shoot themselves in the foot by playing Hollywood balls that don't come off and by making errors in defence that will result in goals. Lee says, doesn't help with League Two being so northern-based, with little away fans travelling to have that banter with the away end. And Jerry says, some fans also like to have a few beers before the game, so maybe reinstate the bar in the town end or the horse box. There was a halftime game the other week that the crowd got behind and was cheering. Then as soon as the game kicked off, it went quiet. Philip, I was going to mention that, actually. there was a terrific game at half time, really got the crowd whipped up. And actually that atmosphere did transfer into the second half. So it is possible. I don't know. James, under 16s. Let's get into that now. We want to get more atmosphere in the county ground. I think everybody is unified in that. Dan was making the point that about the under 16. What is the trust point of view? What are you going to say to the football club at the advisory board next week?
Crikey, hasn't this stirred up a bit of a hornet's nest? I think it's an interesting one, and you can see it both ways from the point of view of the club and the fans. And some fans have been very vocal to say that we haven't pushed, as a fan's perspective, both the OSC and the trust haven't pushed the fans' views about the fact that, the under 16s situation. We certainly have on many counts, many fronts. Formally, I've spoken to Rob 4 times on the phone about it. Formally, sitting down, talking about it. Andy's done the same from the OSC perspective. We weren't consulted about it, which is unusual, but we weren't. It's not a new policy. It's a policy that ultimately was there, but wasn't really being enforced. The reason they've been, I guess, more strict with it is basically because they've had about £15,000 worth of damage in the town end, which they've ultimately, the majority of which they've associated with under 16s. And again, I'm only telling you what I've been told, so don't shoot the messenger. And ultimately, majority of the issues have been with people that have bought tickets on the day rather than season ticket holders. So what they're effectively doing is making sure that that they're looking to try and stop that damage. And interestingly enough, on Saturday there was no issues at all. No damage, and that's probably their first home game in quite a while in the town end. They've not had any issues.
And no atmosphere.
That's one side of the fence. The other side of the fence is, to your point there, Dan, I think about the atmosphere, even before the policy came in or was being reinforced, the atmosphere was rubbish at the county ground. So I don't think it's the that that's caused it. It's probably not made it any better, for sure. Looking at it so what have we done at the trust? What have we done at the OSC? We put together some recommendations on alternatives to what the club have ultimately put in place. And we discussed them with Rob and others at the club. That was discussed 3 or 4 times, pushed quite hard, adjusted a few of those options to try and make them more palatable for the club to accept rather than the policy that's there at the moment. There's probably 6-7 options in terms of creating areas in the Arkles for under 16s, etc. There was lots of options put forward. The club decided ultimately that they wanted to stick with what they'd already come up with. As I said, it was pushed exceptionally hard, and we will continue to keep pushing it because our stance is really that we want to try and encourage younger fans to the ground, but ultimately, seeing it from the club side, they can't afford to keep on stumping up 10s, 12, I think 15,000. I think is the amount that is the damage that's been caused. They can't keep affording to do that. Plus, they get fined as well for the people that come on the pitch. So they're trying to do the right thing, but at the same time, ultimately we've got a situation as it stands now that people that buy tickets on the day obviously have got to be obviously going to be more stringently checked. So the advisory board's next week. We've asked for it to be on the agenda again, so we will talk through it again, see if there are any other options that the club would be willing to look at again, and just keep on pushing it forward. But as I've said on social media, unfortunately, the fans groups, we can push as hard as we like, but we don't own the club, and ultimately the club decide, what they want to do. Possibly, in my view, it would have been better to have discussed the policy with the fans groups beforehand before coming out with it.
It's the problem that it looked as though, I know this isn't It's not unique to Swindon, is it?
No.
It is the problem that it came out on a Friday afternoon and it looked like it was a statement from the club and it wasn't a blanket EFL thing. Is that one of the problems?
I think so. And also, I think, and again, this is some of the feedback we've given the club. I don't think necessarily the statement that came out had all the context in it as to why it was being done. It was kind of just, this is what's being done. And I think that's probably what got most people irate quite quickly on it, which is understandable. Had the club given all of the background and the context as to why they did it and how they were trying to balance the fact that the club can't keep on affording replacing seats and various other things they've had to do in the town end versus obviously the number of 16-year-olds coming in and all that kind of stuff. I think probably people might have understood a little bit as to why they made the decision. They might not have agreed with it still, but they would have at least understood that information wasn't there. And one of the things we did encourage as one of the options is, to go back out to the fans and tell them a little bit more about why perhaps the decision was made and what all the different parameters were. I don't know whether that's something they're going to do. We'll find out in the advisory board next week when we go, but that's kind of where it's at. So it's not something we've given our views, which aren't the view of what the club have come up with. We didn't think it was necessarily the right thing to do. Completely understand the fact that obviously they can't afford to keep on replacing seats and things, but we think there was probably a middle ground option that we could have come up with.
Okay. Right, we've got lots of comments coming in. Jerry Gale says, how about letting in under 16s that are season ticket holders? Stephen says, if things are getting damaged, begs the question, what are the stewards doing? Mark, I'll leave this one with you. I'll get to you on this in a minute, Mark, but it's an interesting one, the safeguarding issue. That's from Kevin. Is there a safeguarding issue? Tony says, needs good stewarding in the town end. If spectators are committing an offence, should be dealt with. All under 16 should be members registered with the club with photographic card at charge, possible £5 per season. Also join the supporters club. Steve says, what are the stewards doing in the town end? And Daz then says, stopping supporters banging on the advertising boards. I mean, Andrew, what have you heard? What have you managed to glean at the BBC about this? I mean, is it similar views that James has expressed?
Yeah, I'm going to say not really. Found out a great deal more. I must admit, to me personally, the fact that there was so much damage going on in the town end on what sounds like a regular basis has come as a bit of a surprise. And I think I agree kind of on the presentation. If the club sort of come out and said, we've had considerable damage to the town end, we've looked at CCTV and we consistently find it is people of a specific age group or whatever, then you might have got more sympathy, although certainly not unanimous agreement for what the proposal is. But yeah, it doesn't sound like there's an easy answer. And clearly, the club just feel like they've reached that point if people are damaging persistently. And I know people kind of expect stewards to get involved and perhaps put themselves at physically at risk, but I'm not sure that's always the easiest thing to ask of people who aren't particularly well paid and sometimes doing that as a second job.
Yeah, I've done that at Wembley, actually. It's not an easy job, I have to tell you, from many years ago when things was a little bit more difficult at football matches, if you get what I mean. Dan, what have you made of what you've heard, Dan? Because you sort of brought the subject up, and we're going to talk about it anyway, but what have you thought?
Okay, let's try and get these in some sort of order. So, firstly, I think the communications up front were poor because it didn't explain what the trigger was for this to suddenly come to the forefront. Had that have been better explained with more context, then to James and Andrew's points, at least you could start trying to understand that. On the 15K's worth of damage, to me, that, as much as they're poorly paid and it might be their second job, that is a stewarding and a policing issue. If someone came to my back garden for a barbecue and trashed the bench, they're not staying at the barbecue. They're not coming to the barbecue again. So police and steward the ground properly. And finally, it seems like such an own goal on the club's perspective, and it seems so short-sighted to tar all under 16s with the same brush. when these are the future fans of Swindon Town Football Club. And whilst you might be looking at the balance sheet now at 15k's worth of damage, what are those future fans who are possibly disenfranchised now? How much money would they put into the club over the next 60 years? And then their kids and their kids. So no, it's sitting very uncomfortably with me. I applaud the trust and the OSC for having those difficult conversations. I think the club need to be more flexible and come halfway here. Otherwise, you do risk denigrating an age group of fans. You know, it'd be almost as daft as saying, well, all of the damage was caused by men, so we're going to ban all men from the county ground. Yeah. It's just a characteristic age. So yeah, come back to the table, please, football club, and let's try and reach some sort of sensible middle ground, perhaps 13 or 14. And that's what we've seen at other clubs in the region, Bristol City, Reading, Bristol Rovers, etc. So it is doable.
Okay, I mean, I asked a very simple question, a show of hands, very quick show of hands. Who went to see the Town under 16? James?
I did.
Yeah, fair enough. That's all of us then. So we've all had that experience. Mark, what about the safeguarding issue? You're a teacher. Safeguarding is a very important part of life these days. Is that a factor or not, would you say?
No, I wouldn't say so, Vic. I don't think so. I think we all went to football, didn't we? As we've just shown, you know, when we were under 16 and sometimes on our own. And of course, life has changed a huge amount, and people are so much more aware now of safeguarding and GDPR issues, aren't they? But I echo what Dan said. It does seem to be a real own goal by the football club, and you just wonder who these people are. You know, if they're causing damage, not only have you got stewards, but is there CCTV around that could catch them? Because we seem to be using a sledgehammer to crack a walnut, don't we? You know, if it's half a dozen people, they are the people who don't come back. You know, it's a bit like me as a teacher saying I've got 260 in my year group, and you know they're all terrible. And the reality is the vast majority of them are absolutely great. And I'm sure that applies to, you know, the under 16-year-olds who go to watch Swindon Town. So let's get back round the table. I think that is the most sensible thing. And let's, you know, start talking about this issue, because these are the fans of the future. We're all here. We were once in the same boat, weren't we? We're the fans of the future 40 years ago, in my case. You know, so let's get round the table. And I don't know what other clubs do. I guess, what do they do? Do people know? Do people in the panel know what they do? And do you, Dan?
Just on that, Mark, one of my Loathed Strangers colleagues, Joe Ross Williams, he did go and have a look at 6 or 7 charters of clubs a similar size to us, and that age figure is much lower, generally 13 or 14. Right. So we've seen that in black and white.
What we would
they're the ones who have to be accompanied by an adult when they're 13 or 14. By the time they get to 15 or 16, they don't. Is that what you said?
So it's sort of either 13 or 14 and below would have to be accompanied.
Well, there are lots of comments coming in. Lots of them.
You can see the merits of that, can't you?
Yeah. What we were trying to do was to find an under 16 who would actually come on the panel and put an under 16's point of view, because, you know, with all due respect, some of us are older than others. And when you said 40 years ago, if only, Mark, if only. But, you know, it would be lovely to talk to an under 16 and get their point of view and how they feel about that. And so if you are under 16, in a couple of weeks' time, when we have another panel, we'd love you to come on and talk about it. Right, because Helen makes this point. Why did the club not invite under 16s to a meeting and explain? Anne says, I think the issue is that the kids aren't there when they bought their seats for, aren't where they bought their seats for, if you see what I mean. Yeah, because they stand up, a lot of them, don't they? Sai says, at the end of it all, if you're a true fan, why are you damaging your own club's facilities? No respect. Well, I don't understand that, and I'm sure none of us do. When you buy your ticket, you have to give name, so they must know who was in the damaged seats. But then that goes back to the point that they may not be necessarily in the seat that they bought. So
I think the issue is in the town end is people sit where they like a lot of the time. They can't track them, and I think on the point of the CCTV, as I understand it, there isn't any. So ultimately, once someone goes in, they can effectively be almost anonymous.
Surprised to hear that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, there must be. I'm sure there's CCTV that covers the ground.
There is some CCTV, but not necessarily in the area where the issues have been actually occurred. As I understand it, I may well be wrong, but as I understand it, because the feedback we got was that we don't want to invest, or we can't invest in additional CCTV until the ground work occurs post purchase of the county ground. So,
well, just to be clear, that's a business decision. That's not a CCTV is impossible.
What about reintroducing junior supporters cards? Anybody remember those? They are registered and then buy a ticket on showing card. What are stewards doing when this damage is done? Most look like kids who are just watching the game, especially in front of Don Rogers' stand. Old Ferrata hire. I've suggested membership cards for under 16s, which they use to purchase tickets. If they're found guilty of offences, then the card is suspended and means they can't buy a ticket. Loads and loads of comments coming in. Just one or two more, James, and then I'll get back. Kevin says, "Hi, Kevin. They're not banning all under 16s. They can go to the games if they have an adult with them," which is an important point. We should make that. Here we go. Hi, Luke. When I was growing up, you had to be with an adult. If in the town end at 16, you could sit in the other stands, no problem. That surely is the best option, a middle ground, which is what I think, James, the club is saying, isn't it? If you have an adult with you, then you can go in.
Correct. Right? Correct.
Yeah. I've seen most clubs have under 15s with adults. That's why don't we get a youth panel supporters club? I'd love to get a youth panel on. Maybe somebody wasn't 66 talking to under 15s might be an interesting one. But anyway, issue photo ID for youngsters under the age of, say, 17. They need ID to buy tickets. So if they cause trouble or damage, they lose the right to have an STFC ID. Improve CCTV then. To be fair, you can't have CCTV in the toilets. So if they get smashed up, there's no CCTV in there. And when I was under 16 in the 70s, violence at footballs and everyday events in the club do anything like this. Police surrounding the pitch with dogs. This stinks what the club is doing. I don't think, James, that's going to happen, is it? Police with dogs? That's not happening inside the ground?
No, I don't think so. I think, all I was going to say, really, I think to add to that is that one of the things I talked to Andy about at the OSC was actually, we get a lot of questions come through on social media, on email channels, whatever it is, even through, these events, for things that people want us to take to the advisory board to ask questions of. I'd actually quite like us to get regular thoughts and feedback from under 16s. So actually some of that, so we can actually represent under 16s, specific under 16s kind of thoughts and opinions actually at the advisory board, because most of the things we do get are generally from, not that kind of age range. So I think one of the things we want to try and do is try and make sure we increase the range of feedback we get from all ages of fans. And obviously, very pertinent at the moment is obviously this under 16 piece. So it'd be good to talk to someone. I think we'll try and do that.
Okay, Claire says any responsible person 16 plus can accompany us under 16 according to the wording in the statement. And Sean said, I think James, that was a case in the 70s. So right, let's draw a line under this. We discussed it enough. Ongoing discussions at the advisory board next week. Let's talk about that thing called football, Andrew. 2 tough away games this week, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, definitely. Bradford are going pretty well, like to pass it around, so it should be a decent game, decent atmosphere out there. And we know Mansfield are not too much change from last season when they reached the playoffs, got to Wembley and then failed to do us all a favour, which was terribly rude of them. But nothing we can do about that. So yeah, this does feel like a pretty sort of good indication of where we are. It feels a bit like lots of people are going around and saying we're 5th. Are we 5th? We're all right, but are we really a top 7 side? And if we can pick up 2 decent results here, then perhaps that will help sort of turn around the atmosphere when we finally get back for a home game after the FA Cup.
Yeah, because it's about 150 years till we got another home game, I think, isn't it? Because all we needed in the cup was another trip north, And guess what? We got another trip north. Yeah, interesting. Who have you got with you tomorrow night, by the way, Andrew?
We've got Rob tomorrow and we've got Phil Smith on Saturday. That's the plan.
Lovely. Dan, your views? Obviously, the home form's excellent, bearing in mind what it was like last year.
Yeah.
And we are 5th in the league, for goodness sake.
Yeah, I mean, there's many things you can congratulate Scott Lindsay and the current squad on. The turnaround in home form from the first 2/3 of last season to the first third of this season is, bordering on remarkable, really, given how poor it was at the start of last season. So 5 wins in 8, only the 1 defeat against promotion contender in Northampton. But also the way we've kind of quietly hoovered up 9 points against, admittedly, 3 poor sides in Newport, Colchester and Hartlepool on Saturday. Those were the kind of home games which were tripping us up last year. So good signs, definitely. And yeah, I suppose I saw Northampton and Stevenage previously as a bit of an early yardstick for where this squad is. And, nothing wrong with it. We came up a bit short in those 2 fixtures. So this week up north to Bradford and then Mansfield, this is another good measure of where the squad's at and how things are progressing. So I'd be delighted probably with 3 points from the 2 games. Anything more than that would be very good signs indeed.
Well, Sean makes that very good point. These next 2 games may tell us where we really are at the moment. Mark, if I said 3 words to you, Ben and Gladwin, what would you say to me?
I would say he's playing very well. I would say he's playing very well in the midfield. Our midfield is strong, isn't it? When you look at Gladwin, I really like Khan. I think he's done really, really well since come in, and Darcy is a midfielder, definitely not a right back. Now we seem to have acquired a right back in Romeo Hutton, who's doing really, really well. Mystery about Louis Reed a little bit, isn't it? When we think he was probably our best player for many games last season, and now he hasn't played a part, I think, in the last 3 games. The midfield's strong for me. Defence is not too bad. Bowdry makes the odd mistake as he did Saturday. Should be hooping it into Rose Ed. Up front, we're still a bit light. And if we go, I think Dan's right. If we go to these 2 tough away games and we get 1 win out of the 2, I think we're doing well. We've played 4 teams in the top 7 so far, and we've got 2 points. So this will tell us quite a lot. We're hoovering at the teams below us, but we seem to be coming up a little bit short when we play the likes of Orient and Salford, and obviously the sides that we've lost to in Northampton and Stevenage. So yeah, it will be a real yardstick, I think, to see whether we're in a false position or not.
I was going to say about Bowdry, Mark. I mean, you made the point about that mistake he made Saturday, but I would counter that by saying there was a throw-in just before that, and before that throw-in, he had his shirt pulled off his back by the number 9, who's repeatedly did that throughout the game. So it should have been a foul.
I'm not going to pillory. Bowdry.
I know.
He's done well. He's come in, and he does seem to make probably 1 mistake a game. I think in League 2 you don't get punished for it too much. Saturday aside, he's a very experienced player, isn't he? And he's complementing Clayton very well. The 2 of them good in partnership. Great shame about McDonald, but we're lucky to have Bowdry. I think he's obviously made the decision to have 1 more year in league football, because I think he was going to retire, wasn't he, at the end of last season? And fair play to him. And actually, the guy he was playing with on Saturday, it was a real battle between the 2 of them, and it was probably 50-50 in the end. So he did really well.
I bet they loved it as well. It's a sort of, an old-fashioned, wasn't it, battle between the 2 of them. I'll get to you in a minute, James, but I just wanted to ask the Reed question. Is he Swindon's version of Cristiano Ronaldo at the moment? What has Scott Lindsay said to you about Reed when you've spoken to him about it?
That's for me. I think the explanation for initially as to why he wasn't playing was just he felt Khan was doing really well and deserved to go. If you remember when Reed was suspended, Khan came in at that sort of foot of the the slightly deeper the midfield 3 and played really well until he got sent off. And Scott said he just wanted to give him a chance, and then it keeps rolling with wins. So he's very much kind of insisted it's all professional. It's based on form. Reed's training well. He's taking it in the right way, as well as one would expect, in that he's a bit grumpy but not kicking up a fuss about it. So that's the party line is, and I've no reason to doubt it. It's just a football decision, and the recent results. If you look at the kind of win at Grimsby and the recent flurry of home wins, do seem to bear it out. Much as I was personally kind of thinking you could have done with Reed at times I thought in the second half against Hartlepool, maybe just when you're trying to knock it about and keep control of it, because Khan wants to run and Reed wants to pass is a very simplistic way of looking at it. But yeah, that's just one of those football decisions, slightly eyebrow raising as it was, but like I say, the results back up the manager.
Absolutely. James, your view? 2 tough away games. Well, then another one after that.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Dan. If we can come away with a few points, those 2 games, it'll give us a good indication of where we're heading this season. I think the thing for me is, I get the whole piece about kind of playing sideways and being a little lethargic and maybe not getting the ball forward quick enough. But every single game we seem to play, certainly obviously at home, there just seems to be a slight improvement every game, and I just think we're on the right trajectory. I think it's probably down to the fact we have had a lot of new players and obviously completely new management team, etc. It's taken them a while to gel, but I think you'd much rather see it that they're improving week on week than the other way, or basically just petering out. And I think that's quite encouraging. I still think if talking about the January window, I still think there's two areas we need to strengthen. One is we need a plan B up front. I think all of our players on the bench are very same old, kind of very similar. I was thinking, and I said to the person that sits next to me in the ground, kind of an Akindi type player. I don't, I just think we need another option up front. We haven't really got that height play. I know Jeff can kind of play that kind of role, but he's not a Simpson type player that can hold the ball up. We really could do with a big lump of a player that can hold the ball up, just to allow us to bring on in the second half. We're not winning. That ultimately gives us a plan B. I just don't think we've got that at the moment, and I think that would be something that really we should look at in January. And I also think we need some help at the back as well, because I still think defensively they make me nervous quite a lot. And I know a few other people have kind of mentioned that as well. But I think midfield, we've got probably the best midfield in League Two, to be perfectly honest. And we need to put Wakeham up front as well, because I think since he signed his extension.
He hasn't scored. I don't think he's scored, has he?
Oh, he's got off the boil a little bit since he signed his new deal, to be honest. I know he's not playing through the middle, but you could always guarantee with Wakeland when he was playing out wide that actually he'd work really hard. He'd get the ball back. He was quite a tough kind of, he didn't give up. And I'm not saying he's given up in the last few games, but he's not had quite the same effect as he's had in previous games. So, I think we need to kind of try and sort that piece out as well. But generally, I'm encouraged.
Yeah, Tony says agree, James. They are getting better. Kevin says we make mistakes tomorrow, we'll get punished. Unless we address the speed in which we go through transitions, we will struggle to break any of the top teams down. At the minute, we're very slow, and it's a tough watch at times. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Let's quickly go around the panel then and ask how many points Swindon Town will get over the next 2 matches. Mr. Hawes?
Yeah, let's go with Dan's minimum requirement and say they pick up a win and a loss, say 3.
Okay, Mark?
I'll go 3. I'm being optimistic.
Well, Dan, you already said it, but do you want to reiterate it?
Well, I got a top trumps. I'm going to go win and a draw. Let's go 4.
4 points.
Yeah,
You've upped it. You've upped it. Mr. Spencer?
I was going to be glass half full and say 4 points.
Okay, some Aston Villa news. Unai Emery is top of the list now and looks to be close to agreeing a deal at Aston Villa. So Gerrard got the bullet over the weekend, so that's more manager news. Gary Caldwell, of course, appointed manager of Exeter today as well. Yes, I think we are getting better week in, week out. James, you're right. We don't have a plan B. Dad says, thank you all. Safe journey tomorrow, peeps. Yeah, looking forward to it. I'll be back in Devon around about 4 o'clock on Wednesday morning and then leaving at 5 o'clock to get to Mansfield on Saturday. So, just stay on the motorway. It saves a lot of hassle, doesn't it, really? Thank you very much indeed. And Mark, behind the scenes, thank you very much indeed as well for not only providing the messages, but driving the whole thing this evening. We'll be back next Monday with our On the Sofa. I'll be wearing a Halloween mask, which will be pretty similar to this, quite frankly. As Michael Doughty will be joining us to talk about his time at Swindon and indeed what he's up to now and why he wasn't at Swindon after he left, if you see what I mean. So that's next week on the Sofa at 7 o'clock on Halloween. Bring your masks, your candles, whatever you wish as well. Thank you very much, Dee, for joining us. We'll see you in 7 days' time.